freelance writer. That's very common. You can travel all over the world that way. And roamed Central Asia for years, gathering intelligence, you see. Frederick Prager, a propagandist for the American military government in post-war Germany, published between 20 and 25 volumes in which the CIA had an interest, either in the writing, the publication itself, or the distribution. Prager said they either reimbursed him directly for the expenses of publication or guaranteed, usually through a foundation, the big foundations again, the purchase of enough copies to make it worthwhile. Do you remember Bill Clinton's supposed autobiography was a bestseller before it was printed? Remember? Books differ from all other propaganda media, wrote Chief of the CIA's Covert Action Staff, primarily because one single book can significantly change the reader's attitude and action to an extent unmatched by the impact of any other single medium, such as to make books the most important weapon of strategic long-range propaganda. The CIA's clandestine books program was run according to the same source, with the following aims in mind: get books published or distributed abroad without revealing any U.S. influence by covertly subsidizing foreign publications or booksellers, get books published which should not be contaminated by any overt tie-in with the U.S. government, especially if the position of the author is delicate, get books published for operational reasons regardless of commercial viability, so it doesn't matter if it's a dud book. Initiate and subsidize indigenous national or international organizations for book publishing or distributing purposes. They set up most of the big international organizations that are at the front today. Remember the 1,000 points of light I keep talking about, the NGOs that George Bush Sr. mentioned in his New World Order speech? Stimulate the writing of politically significant books by unknown foreign authors, either by directly subsidizing the author, if covert contact is feasible, or indirectly through literary agents or publishers. The New York Times alleged in 1977 that the CIA had been involved in the publication of at least 1,000 books. But it's astonishing, you see. They also went into the movie industry as well, but continue with the books here, to do with what they call pen. It says, page 366, having scored a victory at the Bled Congress, John Hunt started preparing for the next Penn conclave. That's the World Association of Writers, Penn, due to take place in New York the following June. This would be the first time in 42 years that the American Center had played host to an international Penn Congress. With stakes this high, the CIA decided to bring out the full battery of its covert arsenal. The Congress for Cultural Freedom, for one, was to play a significant role. It had already given £1,000 actually to Carver in June '65 to start organizing the New York campaign, which was fine-tuned over lunch with Hunt at the Chanterelle restaurant on Brompton Road. The Ford Foundation made a timely intervention, awarding American Penn, PEN, a substantial grant, $75,000, in January '66, and the Rockefeller Foundation coughed up an additional $25,000. The CIA also channeled money to American Penn through the Asia Foundation and the Free Europe Committee. With such investments at stake, John Hunt wrote to David Carver on 9th of February '66, telling him that he thought it wise to try and limit their liability. So everything you read too, you see, that which grabs your spirit and carries you away into great realms, is put out by these guys. You wouldn't want people to have their own ideas and go off in different directions that might be contrary to your agenda, your plan. So you make sure you fill their heads full of your fiction, but your fiction is programmed to take them along a particular path of programming. That's why they call television programming as well. On page 287, movies, like propaganda, trade in fiction, but if this fiction is adroitly manufactured, it will be taken for reality. To perform this function well, Hollywood had long understood the need to cut its mythical patterns to suit the prevailing political and social mood. I've mentioned the movie before. It's called Hollywoodism. It's quite fantastic. If you want to see the power of movies, try and get the series from the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. It's called Sin Cities. It's fantastic to show you how a few people with an idea can alter the whole of society. As Hollywood had long undertaken its need to cut its mythical patterns to suit prevailing political and social mood, thus it had switched from making anti-Bolshevik films in the 1920s and 30s to glorifying Russia as a wartime ally. That's how fast they can change a society's opinion of people they've never even met and probably never will meet. Because they had a little anti-Bolshevist propaganda prior to the 20s and the 30s. But then when Russia was becoming the ally during World War II, suddenly when the action, Russia was a good guy. Who we thank today, Orwell, East Asia or West Asia? I'll be back after these messages. Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt. We're cutting through the matrix and reading from an excellent book called The Cultural Cold War. It's a book worth getting and going through your leisure because there's so much in it. And talking about Hollywood and how the CIA basically were directing Hollywood. And I will be going deeper after this talk into history to show you it isn't just the CIA. But this is to do with their involvement in creating the culture from the 50s on for the Western world. And it said, Hollywood thus has switched from making anti-Bolshevik films in the 20s and 30s to glorifying Russia as a wartime ally in films such as The North Star, Days of Glory, Song of Russia, and the notorious Mission to Moscow, which had actually whitewashed the Moscow trials and praised the Russians as defenders of democracy, to producing a rash of anti-communist films in the 1950s, such as The Red Nightmare, The Red Menace, Invasion USA, I Was a Communist for the FBI, Red Planet Mars, Iron Curtain, My Son John, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Walk East on Beacon Street, which was scripted and financed by the FBI, was J. Edgar Hoover's personal favorite. Their titles as unconvincing as their plots, these films all revealed a neurotic obsession with the outsider, the unknown, the other. That puts me in mind of that military think tank's projection for the future called Known Unknowns. They're always looking at known unknowns as they feed all data into computers and wait for the results. So just as Captain America had switched from battling Nazis to battling communists, the attitude of American films towards Germany changed radically. The vanquished enemy now portrayed as heroic fighters and worthy opponents, such as Rommel, the Desert Fox, 52, The Sea Chase, The Enemy Below, etc. As Monday's enemies became Tuesday's friends, Hollywood showed how easy it could rip off the good and evil labels from one nation and paste them on another. And that's exactly what Orwell was saying in his book 1984, where when the government says, we're now at war with East Asia, we've always been at war with East Asia, you better start parting it too. But it's not too hard because the public really don't have much memory. They don't. And that's what they count on. It's interesting, that ties right in with surveys done in Canada to do with the war on Iraq. And even though all the same medias blamed initially one man in a cave in Afghanistan, poll surveys were done by big polling companies, and they said that within a few months the media, when told basically, had convinced the public that the originator of the plot was Saddam Hussein, and they all wanted to back up the American invasion of Iraq. That's how easy it was, just through propaganda and repetition, to change sides from one enemy to another. It's always been that way. While such films played well to a domestic audience, enthralled to exaggerate claims of the communist menace,